Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with Bettina Sichel from Laurel Glen Vineyard out of Sonoma. Bettina, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome. And can you tell us a little bit about Laurel Glen Vineyard?
Great to be here, Allison. Thank you. So Laurel Glen Vineyard is a Cabernet vineyard on Sonoma Mountain. Sonoma Mountain is the western edge of the Sonoma Valley. The vineyard was first planted as a Cabernet in the 1960s, and we consider the site to be a great site for the variety, producing really distinctive Cabernet with great structure and complexity.
Fantastic. So how many acres do you own, and are you also purchasing any fruit? And in the end, how much wine are you making?
The vineyard is 14 acres, and we make 2 Cabernets from the vineyard, our Laurel Glen Vineyard Estate Cabernet, our flagship, and also another Cabernet we call Counterpoint, which is the Cabernet to which the vineyard lots go, which are the most approachable, the most ready to drink. We buy a little Merlot from one of our neighbors, the Pickberry Vineyard, for Counterpoint, but Laurel Glen is 100% estate.
And are your wines available across the U.S.?
We are distributed in about 17 states, but total production of these wines is about 3,000 cases. So you can find them in, better restaurants, better wine shops, but, it's kind of hit or miss.
Absolutely. So tell me, what was your first memory of wine, related to wine?
Oh, well, I grew up in a family that made wine in Germany. My family is most famous for the wine Blue Nun. So I certainly had many bottles of Blue Nun on the table in my glass as I was growing up. But probably the wine that, kind of really sparked a love of wine was a 1974 Semi Reserve Cabernet that my father served for some dignitaries visiting from Bordeaux. And I was probably 14, 15. And that to me was the first wine that really spoke to how incredible wine could be.
Fantastic. Was that sort of setting a bar of what you wanted to do, or it was just introducing you to the greatness of wine?
It really was just introducing me to how wine could really transcend just, being fermented grape juice.
So, obviously growing up in a family that has a very famous name of German wine and traveling the world abroad, is there a favorite wine other than Blue Nun that you have drunk from somewhere in the world?
Well, I'm very partial to German Riesling. I consider it to be one of the great wines of the world. And I like to drink, high acid whites. I like white by itself. I prefer red with a meal. But basically, if it's well-made wine, I love it. So it doesn't matter where it comes from.
Who do you think among all the populations of the world drinks the best quality in wine?
Well, I think we are very spoiled here in this country. We have the world to choose from. You could go into your local Safeway, and the variety of wines on offer is pretty impressive. And we're much more agnostic about wine. Americans drink wine from everywhere, whereas if you go to France, for instance, it's primarily French wine. It's hard to find wine from a lot of countries. So I think we have it pretty good here.
And do you have a cellar of wine?
Well, I did. Unfortunately, it burned down about a year ago. I lost my house in the October wildfires.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, thank you. So I had a great cellar.
Oh, it's so tragic. I mean, so many things were lost, and while you're okay and, it's terrible to lose your house, I understand losing a cellar is also part of just a history that's lost. And what do you recall your most expensive bottle in your cellar was that unfortunately you don't have anymore?
Well, so what's interesting is, I lost the house that we lived in for 19 years, and there's so few things I miss. And among the things I miss are, certain bottles of wine which had, a deep nostalgic value. So when I bought Laurel Glen, Patrick Campbell, the founder, gave me as a gift a 6-liter bottle of Camus Cabernet from the 1970s. And I was really looking forward to drinking that bottle, but now I will never have the opportunity.
I guess that's a lesson that you just don't hold on to things for too long.
Absolutely.
So do you believe in a such thing as a perfect variety?
Perfect variety. Well, I think Riesling is pretty perfect. I think Cabernet Sauvignon is pretty perfect. What I love about Cabernet Sauvignon is how it changes as it ages. It's such a different beast when it's young from when it's old. And I love that, kind of so many things in one bottle kind of aspect to it. I don't know. No, I don't know if there's a perfect variety. That's a big title to hang on.
And what is your opinion on wine critics and scores?
Well, I love them when they're good. I don't know. It's one of those things. I've been in the wine business my entire career, which is now, 30 or 40, maybe 30 years, a long time. So it's sort of something I've learned to live with, and they definitely help selling. There is an element there that helps to sell the wine. It's too bad though when you reduce wine to a number. Mm-hmm. It's so unfair to the wine.
Right, because there's something behind the wine. There's the person and the place. And speaking of the person, let's learn a little bit about you personally. Your wine preferences, of course. Red, white, or rosé?
Well, I like them all. As long as it's a well-made example, I love it. So, yes, I drink all of those wines.
Okay, still or sparkling wine?
I'm very partial to sparkling. Shh, don't tell my parents.
Okay, champagne or sparkling from somewhere else?
Well, probably 5 years ago I would have said champagne, but I was in England not too long ago. I was really impressed by the quality of the sparkling wine. I live in Sonoma County. I'm really impressed by it. So I'm not sure I would say champagne any longer. Ooh. But I am awfully partial to good sparkling wine. And a lot of it comes from champagne.
So when it comes to food and wine pairing, do you feel that you have to follow the rules, white wine with fish, red wine with meat, or how do you feel about food and wine pairing, or any little tricks you have?
Well, I believe a lot of the success of a pairing comes from the sauce. So, a piece of, let's say, chicken by itself could probably go with any kind of wine. And you can tweak that pairing depending on, how you season the chicken, what kind of... So, yeah, I think, wine, there is definitely a trick to it, but... I don't think it's as simple as red wine with fish.
Sometimes we drink a little too much wine. And in the morning we don't feel so great. Do you have any remedies for hangovers?
Really good strong coffee. A nice big Advil. And a good hot shower. That works for me pretty, without fail.
Fantastic. So tell me something. What do you think a non-drinker loses out by not drinking your wines?
So to me, what is so special about the Laurel Glen Vineyard Cabernets is this is Cabernet with acidity, which is not commonplace in California. So if you're a fan of California Cabernet and you love that big fruit, which I do, if you've never had a California Cabernet with that big fruit that also has this, a nice structure, a nice acidic backbone, I think you've really, missed out on a experience which I consider to be very special.
And so let's just imagine that space aliens were to land on your vineyard. What wine would you share with them?
Oh, what wine would I share with them? Wow, that's a good one. Well, okay, so I guess I would have to pour them some Laurel Glen Cabernet, right? Uh-huh. So I would probably share with them maybe the 2009 vintage, something that had a little bit of bottle age, but still had like good fruit, but a very sort of like well integrated, silky finish. Yeah, 2009.
Yeah, because you were telling me that you purchased the property in 2011 and it came with a large library of wines. How far back does it go?
I have a library that extends back to 1981. Every single vintage from 1981 to the present day.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Think of what you could do with that.
So, going back to 81, even though you weren't there, they say that every vintage tells a different story. Do you agree with that? And if so, what are things that you think repeat themselves more often than not, or do you not see patterns?
Well, I think one of the strengths of making wine from a single vineyard is that Mother Nature is such an important part of the winemaking process. So every year there are some differences in terms of when it rains, what the heat spikes, the cool spells. So all those imprint themselves on the vineyard, or the vintage rather. Mm-hmm. So what I've noticed, and now having tasted many, many vintages of Laurel Glen, is there is definitely a family resemblance in every vintage in terms of the structure, the kind of minerality, the sort of, the expression of the soil. Mm-hmm. But then some years the fruit is sweeter than others. Some year the fruit is more savory than others. So it's more in the fruit expression and in kind of the degree of sort of richness, like fleshiness or the sort of richness of the mid palate. Mm-hmm. That to me is where I see Mother Nature kind of, expressing the differences.
Yeah. And as we've just finished a harvest, I'm just curious, do you have any rituals any good luck rituals for when it's about to start?
Oh, God, serious prayer. But actually, we have not finished our harvest yet. So we're kind of in the middle of harvest.
And do you capture any signs or omens each year that are going to predict the outcome of harvest? This is where the superstition comes in.
Well, it makes me very nervous when it rains during harvest, which it did this year. And to me, the harvest starts in the spring. So when the fruit, when the vines come out of dormancy and we're going through fruit set, bloom fruit set. If that goes well, I feel like we are halfway to a good harvest.
So many producers walk through their cellars and they speak to their wine in the barrels. Do you speak to your wine? And if so, what do you say to it?
I do not speak to my wine. I'm sorry to say.
You just leave it out on its own.
I just let it think its own thoughts. I don't try to influence it.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be an artist, first and foremost. I was also really into horses. I wanted to be a painter. What
actually got you to get into wine itself?
I grew up in a family where there was a tradition of each generation kind of going into the family business. I was the oldest. There were no boys. So it was an unspoken, kind of assumption that I would go into the family business. And when I sort of, realized I didn't have the talent or the passion to really be an artist, wine seemed as good an option as any, and it's been a great, great ride.
So when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
Well, I love to cook. I love to travel. I love to read. I have 2 kids. So, I love to hang out with them. I have a husband. I don't know, stuff like that.
Do you have a favorite film dedicated to wine?
Oh, I love Sideways. I think that is about the best representation of... I've never heard wine spoken about so well as in Sideways.
And for a really romantic evening, moving on to something else, what wine would you order?
Isn't that a good question? Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, it would be a Cabernet with some age on it. So at least a 10-year-old Cabernet. Older would even be better. Yeah, something that has some age, that has, has mellowed, has, all those beautiful secondary characteristics. It could be Pinot, but yeah, Cabernet would be first.
I'm getting thirsty. What was the best piece of advice you ever received?
Don't take it too personally because, it'll all look different tomorrow. It's actually a very good piece of advice.
Yes. And if you were able to give us, our listeners, a little piece of advice today, what would you leave us with?
I would leave you with, do not commit yourself to one particular grape variety or one particular region. Keep your mind open. There's good wine made everywhere on the planet, and well-made wine is always a revelation, no matter what the variety or the region. So keep your mind open.
What would you consider your proudest achievement in your work to date?
Well, I'm very proud of, the wines we're making today. I'm very proud of how healthy the vineyard is today. We're now certified organic. I'm very proud of the fact that we're still standing. I'm very proud of the fact that, I have maintained a really good relationship with the founder, and I think he's very pleased with how things have turned out. All of the above.
That's a lot of good accomplishments. So, complete the sentence. A table without wine is like...
a meal without seasoning.
Okay, a VIP person is sitting at a table. It can be from any walk of life. They're sitting at a table and the paparazzi walk by and they take a shot through the window. And in that shot is your bottle sitting on the table.
Ooh.
Who would you want that person to be drinking your wine?
Oh, George Clooney. Duh.
That was the easiest question ever. Do you think we will still be drinking wine in 2,000 years' time?
Yes, I do. I mean, we're drinking wine now, 2,000 years later. Why wouldn't we keep doing it for 2,000 more years?
Do you have some sort of idea of what we might be drinking in 300 years, or maybe not 2,000 because we don't know what will happen to this world, but in 200-300 years?
Well, I hope we are drinking wines that, speak of the place they're grown on. I hope that the sort of, traditional methods are still as popular and still as valued. But I don't know.
So, you're going to a deserted island and you can take 3 wines with you.
Oh, no.
What are the 3 wines you'd want to have with you?
Well, I would probably want to take a bottle of port or sherry because it lasts a long time and I can drink it slowly. And then I would want to take probably, a Cabernet which is robust and maybe not as sensitive to heat and, is going to, withstand some adverse conditions. And then I want to take a really big bottle of... Okay, the really big bottle is the Cabernet, yes. And then maybe 2 bottles. I don't know. I give up.
What about sparkling wine?
Well, yeah, but I don't think it'll, survive.
That's being very practical. This is your deserted island.
I would definitely take a bottle of really good champagne. Yes.
What winemaking area in the world do you still want to explore?
Let's see. Well, I'm really curious about the north of Italy, the Alto Adige. I've had some amazing wines from there, and I just love the sort of the cultural, melange that goes on there. I had some Riesling from the country that's next to Germany. It's a tiny wine producing area. I want to say Lithuania, but it's not Lithuania. It's Liechtenstein.
Oh, Liechtenstein.
So that's an area I'd love to visit because I had a Riesling from there that just was mind-blowing. There's a lot of parts of the U.S. that are making some interesting wines. So, for instance, I've never visited the Finger Lakes. I would like to go. I'm really curious about the Okanagan Peninsula. I love the wines of Greece, and there are parts of Greece that are now making really interesting wines. There's so many places.
Well, you're going to have to start traveling. Well, before you go on your journey around the world to go taste wine, the last thing we do on our fun little wine soundtrack podcast here is that we like to tie in music and wine. So I'm just going to name 3 grapes, 3 varieties that you've been talking a lot about, that you must drink a lot, and just tell me what kind of music you listen to or what it makes you think of. So let's start with sparkling wine, champagne.
Well, it's French, so maybe something classical. Maybe Chopin. Maybe the music of Chopin.
Okay. And what about German Riesling?
German Riesling. Well, that's racy. And my son really likes rap. So he downloaded on my phone not too long ago this new single from a rapper named Brockhampton, which I actually kind of like. So let's go with that.
Rap and Riesling. That's a new
Racy.
one. It's racy. And of course, Sonoma Mountain Cabernet.
Well, jazz. Definitely jazz. No doubt about it. And preferably guitar, jazz-influenced guitar.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Bettina, thank you so much for joining us today. And just before we go, if you could remind people where they can find you online and in person.
We have a fabulous website. The address is laurelglen.com, LaurelGlen.com. We can be found on Instagram, Laurel Glen Vineyard, Twitter, Facebook, although I'm in charge of the Facebook account, so it's the worst of the social media accounts. And come visit us. We have a beautiful tasting room in Glen Ellen, California, and we love to see you there.
Well, fantastic. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful evening. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.